Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Majitog Dark Ember the 4th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Dragons of Time, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. I would like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members and Patron patrons, and invite you to consider becoming a member or patron. The links are in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance gaming materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective only, and if you have any thoughts or disagree with mine, I invite you to share them in YouTube chat, or if you're watching this after the fact, in the comments below. All right, this is a pre-written review, and this is an anthology, so there's a bunch of different stories. All of these reviews are pretty much synopses of the actual short story itself, and then I sort of extrapolate a little bit with my thoughts. But if you have thoughts about any of these stories, please put them in the chat, and then I will, of course, sort of bounce off those at the end of this review. And we'll sort of go from there. Chris, how you doing, man? You can't pull that off. Yo, yo, yo. All right. We're starting with Homecoming by Lizz Weis. This is an interesting story about a family waiting for their son to return home after the War of the Lance. His name is Darden, and his sister Emberlyn has a secret pet she's keeping in the barn. Darden has PTSD from the war, and his sister invites him to visit her pet. It turns out to be a black dragon wormling. Darden tries to kill it, but it is saved by Emberlyn, and she runs off into the wilderness. She encounters a giant cave spider's lair, which begins to stalk her. Darden chases after his sister, sure the wormling is going to kill her, and as he witnessed dragons decimate the entire towns during the war. When he finally catches up to Emberlyn, she's wrapped up in the spider's web. He begins to trying to rescue her, but the spider pins him down, and the wormling begins to lurk from the distance. It attacks the spider, forcing it to retreat, and frees the two of them from the webs, as Darden finishes the spider off with his sword. He convinces Emberlyn to leave the wormling here, and they return home with the intention of visiting it. The black dragon wormling is intelligent and begins to feed on the humanoid victims in the cave spider. It plans on returning to town when it's larger to enslave and feed on the silly humans there. This story is great, as it presents the wormling as an innocent pet, but then showcases its evil intentions that are hidden from its caretaker when it's small and vulnerable. I really like the direction this took, but I wish they would have gone a little bit more in taking time to explore the PTSD of Darden, like him freezing in battle or going crazy momentarily with the cave spider. Something to make the mention of it in his dreams make sense. Chain of Fools is the next short story by Cam Banks. This was a lot of fun. It was a story about the former Green Dragon High Lord Hulk Skull Smasher, a half-ogre who was cursed by a wizard with feeble-mindedness and could only speak the word Hulk. He was captured by the Whitestone forces during the War of the Lance and chained to a goblin named Mudskip, a gnoll, and two Narakan humans. They were on their way to a prisoner exchange, and Hulk convinced them all to lean against a massive bridge edge, which toppled and they crashed into the ground. They fled and discovered a town on fire. They put out the oven fire and discovered a dragon. They weren't sure of its color at first, but it was revealed to be a brass dragon. Hulk set a plan in motion to kill the dragon, and it seemed the dragon was falling into the trap, only to turn at the last moment, which caused the chained group to fall into a river. The dragon laughed and told them it was waiting for the townspeople to return to apologize for being out of the war for so long. She asked them to relay the message and left after freeing them. They told the townspeople they rescued them from the dragon and were treated like heroes. Even though Hulk could never speak more than his name, he was relatively happy now. It was fun seeing them try to work together with nothing but one word able to be put together for tactics, but only saying the word Hulk. It reminded me of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou film, with the chained prisoners sort of running around trying to get away from the authorities. And in this case, a little bit of Game of Thrones, Hodor, but with Hulk. Fun little series, or short story anyway. All right, the next short story is called Jaws of Defeat by Paul B. Thompson. I didn't expect this type of a tale or an ending to it. It starts with a red dragon kicking their children out of its lair. Raider, a red dragon left to find his own lair. He is as bold and confident as any red dragon. He finds a peak but senses another dragon there. It ends up being a copper dragon who he fights. And let me quickly just say this. This was one of the best described dragon-on-dragon fights I've read. It was long, drawn out, but filled with clever tricks and maneuvers. They battled until they both heard a voice booming in their minds. It was the Master of the Mountain. It ends up being a very ancient dragon who has become part of the mountain as it's so large it cannot fly. It tells the two younger dragons that only the winner of their conflict will gain the treasure and dominion of the mountain. The dragons continue to battle, and eventually the copper leads the red into a trap as he flies head first into a rock wall. It breaks his wings and injures him greatly. Ro, the Venerable, the Master of the Mountain, then captures the copper dragon, Cirrus, and transforms her into gold, becoming part of the mountain. But he lets Raider leave. He says he's keeping the weak and impetuous red dragon around to sire more weak and impetuous red dragons, thereby maintaining the balance in the world. The dragon hates this notion, but he doesn't dream of attacking Ro and is given one night to get off Ro's mountain. Raider walks off the mountain with new determination to be a powerful red. It's a nice story with a theme being there is always someone more powerful than yourself, and survival's not always because you are the fittest. The next one is called Unforgotten by Jean Rabe. This was a bit of an odd tale. It features two dwarves, Rurik and Nador, who hired a third dwarf after having bought a map to a treasure statue together. They distrust each other so much, they split the map in half and, with the hired digging third dwarf, went after the statue. They were searching the Carolized Mountains for a while, arguing over the treasure. Rurik insisted it was one of the dragon statues Paladin forgot to infuse with life, and Nador insisted it was a magical dragon statue crafted by a silver dragon and hid here during the War of the Lance. They have constant mocking banter between the two of them, which is fun to read, and the third dwarf is doing all the hard work. They eventually find the statue, and Rurik and Nador begin arguing and fighting each other while the third dwarf transforms into a massive silver dragon and flies off with the statue. This doesn't deter the two from arguing about who was right and the color of the dragon that stole their treasure. If there's a moral to this story, it has to have something to do with focusing on the task at hand, don't be so greedy that you lose your prize, and only hire those you trust. Else there's really no point to this story, just an opportunity for an author to argue between two characters. The next story is called I Read It in the Flying Dragon by Douglas W. Clark. This is a tale about a reporter named Randall Wickett. He's been writing incredibly boring stories for a local paper about quilting societies and such, and wants to write about something grander, more exciting. He gets inspiration one night at the pub while a traveler bagpiper arrives in town. He uses the traveler as a source for a fictional story. He took it to the editor, and after some questioning and complaining about the possible fabrication of the paper, they printed it. This went on for weeks, with the stories getting wilder and sources getting more fictitious. He then makes up a story about two local cows who give birth, about a local cow who gives birth to a snake. This prompted a massive visit to the rancher, demanding an auction. The rancher was an advertiser in the paper and complained to the editor. Get your writer in check, or else. This could mean he won't pay for an ad space or something even more sinister. So the editor warns the writer, yet publishes a new fictitious story about a cutthroat alley in town where a murder occurred. The editor told the writer the following day to follow up on the paper, and the writer, after having received local admiration for his articles, finally believed his editor understood his vision and left to get the story. Once the writer got to the alley, he discovered something in the end. As he approached the figure turning and slowly starting toward him, haunted and dead-looking. From behind, someone grabbed him and slid a knife across his throat, killing him. Then we cut to another writer being told the story as a cautionary tale. Don't make up stories, and you'll do just fine. It was a fun story about murder, faux journalism, and the reality of business interests. We truly are beholden to those who pay our bills. Bite the hand that feeds, and you can end up hanging. The next one is called Aurora's Heart by Rachel Gobar, not the dragon Aurora. This was a dark story, arguably the darkest I have ever read in Dragonlance. It deals with the rape of young women, the torture of children, and murdering them. I mean, dark stuff. It starts with the character Aurora, who was tormented by her father for not being a man and forced to fight her whole life. When bandits raped, tortured, and murdered her family, they let her live after cutting off her ear. She ended up going into service of the Solamnic Knights as a special spy garrison. She snuck into the Dark Knight's employ as a child spy and reported their doings back to the Solamnics, though she didn't see any difference between the two. She finally finished her service when she came across a building where a young boy was being brutalized by Dark Knights. She killed one before she was caught and tortured. She eventually killed them and freed the boy, but was grievously wounded in the process. The boy was a polymorphed golden dragon and flew her to safety and tried to heal her before flying off himself. He was considering killing her for having been so vulnerable and helpless. She awoke after the dragon left, and that was the end of the story. It was rough and spoke of the brutality of war, regardless of the side you're on. It also spoke to one's inner demons, those tortured memories that are forever present and are used as much for motivation as inner torment. In a sick way, I wish there were more stories like this in this war-torn campaign setting. The Dragon's Claw by Jake Bell. Whoa, what a fun story to read on Halloween. This story is about an acolyte of Chemish in the Age of Mortals named Damien. I know, on the nose. He isn't respected by his mentor, but he is by the Great Mother, the leader of the Brotherhood of Death. She lived when the gods were on Krynn and believes that they will return. Damien is in the graveyard, plundering the graves for artifacts to give for the coming ritual. He finds a corpse that offers him a dragon claw bracelet. It promises him power and that Chemish has returned and looks kindly on him. He leaves to show it to the Great Mother, and his master is there as well, refuting his story about Chemish returning. As Damien leaves their audience, his mentor kills the Great Mother. Damien returns to find her corpse and grabs the knife on her bed. His mentor re-enters the room with monks and declares Damien the killer. He's presented for trial the following day before the ceremony and summons the Great Mother to unlife, who points to his mentor as the killer. A great skeletal dragon flies overhead and lands next to Damien, and it kills those monks. I clearly have a typo. That are disloyal to Chemish. Damien becomes the new leader of the Brotherhood and is offered death by the dragon, which he accepts. Then he awakens to other grave robbers, opening his grave, and he offers them the Dragon Claw bracelet. This is what I've always loved about Chemish. Even those who worship him are tormented by him, and they seem to be okay with it. This is why the Dark Disciple trilogy was so great, in my opinion. It presented an entirely different side to Chemish and his worshippers. The next story is called Bloodrage by Kevin T. Stein. Look, this would be an infinitely better story if the author could actually write. It was clipped, written in shortened phrases, and because of that, it was incredibly difficult to read. The story is really about a noble draconian, the only story I've ever read about a noble draconian thus far, named Quid. He's a follower of Xivalin and a protector of the forest. A thread of chaos opened a portal to the abyss in his forest, and a demon of Morgian came through. Quid's assistant, a forest protector, Centaur, went to investigate and kill the demon, but was infected by chaos first. And the demon's infected blood ran into the stream, infecting all the forest animals as well. Quid becomes a Bundesfar, a creature who is bonded to his... Quid comes across a Bundesfar, a creature who is bonded to his wolf, and together become incredibly powerful and inseparable. They're running through the forest, killing the chaos-infected animals when they're wounded. Quid finds them and offers them a chance at killing the centaur as he closes the portal. They try to no avail. Then, out of nowhere, there's another Bundesfar there helping, who offers to close the portal. When the first Bundesfar's wolf is dying, he refuses to let him die alone and drinks his blood. After a ritual, he realizes he has to close the portal from the inside, but it means he will be in the abyss forever, tormented with the disease. He chooses to do so anyway, and Quid destroys the demon's corpse and turns the river to stone. It's a very poorly written tale with a bunch of German language influencing it, and it breaks the immersion completely. Apparently, the Dark Queen created these Bundeswehr in the Age of Might or so, and this one was living since then. I don't know. I don't think I will ever read this again, and all I want to do is forget I read it the first time. The next one is The Vow by Richard A. Knaak. Now, this was an interesting tale. It's set after the Minotaur Empire took control of Sylvanesti and renamed it Ambien. There was a battle between Minotaurs and Ogres, and one Minotaur, Ulthar, a friend of Chonos, was killed. Before he died, he had his friend Chonos swear to deliver his axe to his son Kailas. Chonos agreed, even though he was badly wounded himself. He began to travel to the fort when he saw a brass dragon with its rider overhead, and then they were attacked by a red dragon. They fought, and the brass dragon flew down to the ground. As Chonos continued on, he came across the dragon, who was mourning his dead rider, Skorios. The dragon burns the rider in a funeral as Chonos asks for help. The dragon isn't in the mood to fight or kill the Minotaur, so he tries to get him to leave, but the Minotaur refuses. He knows he won't make it to the fort to deliver the axe. He's just too weak, but the dragon could help. He tells the dragon his story, and the dragon still refuses. It tells Chonos ogres are coming, and he flies away. Chonos fights as best he can, but he's overrun by the ogres. The brass dragon returns to kill the ogres and takes pity on the stupid Minotaur's vow. He plans to take the axe to the fort and then return to the elves' resistance fighters. Not only is this the end of the Age of Mortals that I know of, set with elves fighting the Minotaurs to retake their homeland, but it features the concept of elves fighting the Minotaurs to retake their homeland. This is something that I've wanted to read about since the War of Souls. I hope there are more tales about this. I really enjoyed this short story, proving that Knaak really can write well, even when it's not dealing with Kaz or Huma. All right. Song of the Mother is the next short story by Lucien Soulban. So this was an interesting story set in the ocean. We don't get many of them, so I really appreciate it when they come along. It's centered on Ashkum, an ocean strider, and Briseis, a Dargonesty, and they're enjoying the sea. Echo Fury, Briseis' war dolphin, arrives and tells them a pod of whales is coming by. They go to investigate, and they're led by a massive crest-breaker whale. They try to get close to them and are pushed off, but the whales are headed into Stone Splitter, a dragon turtle's territory, not to mention the other monsters that dwell in the area. The group tries again to dissuade the whales, but are attacked by a giant eel. One whale saved Briseis from the eel, but she is wounded, and all the blood in the water is sure to attract predators. They saw a massive king titan shark with a bunch of other sharks pass overhead earlier, so they know that they're close. When Briseis tries to warn the whales, they share a vision about how they are leading the dangerous predators away, so their herd of whales coming in their wake can make it through the area. They are having a mass migration away from these waters. Knowing that they are headed to their deaths, the group decides to help as best they can. They battle massive crabs, squids, abyss lurkers, and finally Stone Splitter. But as soon as he arrives, the group leaves and the whales thank them for their aid. They return to Istar Waters, and Apoletta is there to get the download. This was great, and it just makes me want to play an underwater campaign. The story about water creatures helping other water creatures is a great one, and while it's really no different than a land adventure, in concept it feels very different and fresh. I want more underwater adventure stories. The next short story is called The Eight by Mary H. Herbert. This was an interesting, if needlessly elaborate, story. It's about Linsha Majir, who is watching 8 brass wormlings for Crucible, the bronze dragon, or Lord Bite, the governor of Sanction in his human form. One of the brass ruined a tapestry of Bites, and Linsha demanded he take it to be cleaned. She tracked the brass, who ended up going into one of the temple's underground tunnels to search for treasure to replace the item, and an earthquake trapped Linsha under the mountain and allowed a fire dragon into the area as well. The brass goes back to get the nest mates, and they all mount a rescue. They try to get to where Linsha is, but she's unconscious and unresponsive. Then they run across the fire dragon. One of them gets their wings torn and singed, and they seek the aid of shadow people after escaping the dragon. The shadow people tell them about a dam holding back an underground stream they could use to get rid of the fire dragon, and they all continue their search. They eventually find Linsha, and the fire dragon finds them. One of the brass lures the dragon to attack him, hitting the dam and forcing it a mile downstream through the rush of water, and the group brings Linsha to Crucible's lair. He collects the fallen knight and brings her to safety. The 8 wormlings return home after their adventure. That was kind of it. A rescue mission. It was nice returning to Linsha after reading all her stories, but it really didn't have anything to do with her. It was really about the wormlings. And to be fair, I don't care about them at all. I did still enjoy the story, though. All right, the next and last story is No Strings Attached by Miranda Horner and Margaret Weis. I did not expect this story. It's about a barmaid named Tansy who's working with a black-robed magician who is working when a black-robed magician has been coming in and sexually harassing her, even groping her. She makes a deal with a local man named Trent to help her rob the black robe. She flirts with him and gets him really, really drunk, then leads him to his room. That's where they jump him. She makes a comment about how this is similar to a puppet show as she's hitting him with a fireplace poker. As she leaves, she hears him mutter something in the arcane tongue. He casts a spell on her to make her his puppet, like in a puppet show, where she is forced to relive the experience as he is controlling her for the glee of the viewers. She realizes that she's now trapped. It's a cautionary tale about theft, feeding into delusions, and robbing an evil black-robe wizard. I enjoyed it, though it was far too short and there was no real conclusion other than the reveal of the trap by the black robe. All in all, I thought this was an interesting collection with a few really good stories and a couple that I will not miss after this review. If you're a fan of Dragonlance or any of these authors, you should definitely read the book. If you're more of a casual, non-completionist fan, I think you could skip it. All right. So, Chris, thanks for tuning in. Skull Cowboy, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. You think Elizabeth Weis, Margaret's daughter, she is. You really enjoyed her story about the baby dragon. That was the premise behind the popular fantasy series Aragorn. Aragorn was fun. I really liked that movie, actually. I think she did a fine job. Yeah. You love the story about the ancient red dragon story. What an interesting idea about weakening the race of dragons, survival of the weakest. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. And the idea that that dragon was so ancient in the time that it was set too. Like, did he serve, like, was he around during the Dragon Purge? You know, like, he must have been. I don't know. I like the idea of the ancient dragon becoming the size of a mountain like this, as opposed to aging poorly like Matafleur, as great as that character was. Yeah, I like that too. And I like the idea that, like, sort of like in Neverending Story, the turtle that had all the foliage growing on him. I like the idea that a creature stays in one place for so long that the environment just sort of swallows them in a way. And so he's like completely covered. They're not even sure where his head or body is, just the massive size of a single scale being like, I think it was like 3 to 6 feet wide or something like that. And normally they're like inches wide when they're old. So that just tells you how massive this dragon actually was and how ancient it really was. I want to learn more about the Master of the Mountain, Ro, that dragon. I want that to be extrapolated on so badly. The news reporter's story was fun. You always like the idea of gnomes could integrate with more modern inventions from our world, the printing press. Yeah, and I don't know, like the whole idea of paper. Like Wizards of High Sorcery, they have to have spell books. There's scrolls for paper. But the idea of having daily, repeatable, wasted paper is so anathema to any sort of fantasy world. It's just not it's so hard to make paper in this sort of fantasy era world that it's incredibly valuable. And so the idea of just printing these papers and handing them out is absurd. Like, it would be such an expensive enterprise that local ranchers paying for ad space would never make up that huge deficit. You would just have to be an incredibly wealthy merchant for no reason and just spend money, and then sourcing the paper and the amount of time it takes to make the paper. It's just so illogical. But if anyone could do it, it would be a gnome, but then it would probably blow up. So that's the other side of it. Gnomes are not supposed to be able to make things that work effectively repeatedly. And the idea of a printing press, the only thing about it is that it has to be successful and repeatable. So I don't know, that part kind of bothered me. The Aurora story was devastating, but she was a true hero as DragonLance has ever had, overcoming the worst trauma and still able. Yeah, and I was surprised by the details of the actual rape and stuff. Like, that shit shocked me. I did not believe they would have that in a DragonLance book, but here we are. And you couldn't get through the book. Yeah, there's some stories like that Bundesfahr story. I hated that story. I just thought it was written so poorly that it was hard for me to keep track of what the hell was happening. And I read every single day of my life for hours. And I don't understand why it was so chopped up and just convoluted. And it just jumped everywhere. Suddenly characters were there that were never there before. They revisited old ground. It's just like the whole thing was odd. I don't know why it was even included in this collection. You love the Knaak story. Shoot, where'd it go? You're a fan fiction that from my fan fiction that I'm fascinated by the imminent Minotaur occupation attempt of Ancelon and Krynn's future. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a good short story you wrote. I love that era too. I mean, that's why I'm playing the Tyranny of Dragons campaign in that era, over a decade after Takhisis died. And I love the idea that not only was it a tease that the elves were clearly retaking or trying to retake Sylvanesty, which of course Porthios was over there trying to retake Quillinesty, so it just stands to reason that there would be elves trying to retake Sylvanesty. However, this is also during the Elven Exiles series time, and the elves being ostracized from both Quillinesty and Sylvanesty all migrated together, by and large, into the valley of Inoth Wakenti next to Kerr. So that's when even Porthios came over and helped. And so all of the elves are there. What if they're using that as the staging ground to try to retake Sylvanesty? And when they retake Sylvanesty, they'll go back over and try to retake Quillinesty together as a unified elven nation. I love that idea. And I love the idea that Minotaurs have these little outposts around the borders of Ambien trying to maintain control and expand their territory, fighting against the ogres that are there in their own territory. It's such a great idea that you have this sort of trifecta of Minotaur v. Elf v. Ogre. All three of them hate each other. Could there be a situation where it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, where the elves team up with the ogres to attack the Minotaurs? That would be amazing. His short story ignited all sorts of possibilities in my mind for storytelling, and I really want to explore it a little bit. All right. It's just proof that Richard Knaak is a great writer. That's really what it comes down to. Previously unread by you, stories by Margaret Weis like this last one are like fun gifts. You never get tired of writing. Yeah, but my only problem was it was so short. Like, I just wanted a little bit more meat to this story, and I just didn't get any of it, A fun anthology that focused on dragons more than Dragons of Chaos, but the time jumps require a deep knowledge of Dragonlance that would likely confuse casual fans. Yeah, for sure. Because at the beginning of each of these short stories, it tells you the time, the year that the story takes place in. And you do really have to know the timeline to fully conceptualize when the stories are taking place. And the world events that are happening at that timeline help to contextualize the stories. And for people like me, I love that stuff. For people who may be more casual fans, like only reading the Chronicles and Legends, it might be a bit more confusing to you. What's your favorite character from the original trilogy? The original trilogy being the Chronicles, I would have to say it changes, man. It changes a lot. First of all, unknown number C7Z. Thanks for tuning in live. I would have to say right now, I always like Tanis Half Elven. Sturm Brightblade, I switch between those two as my favorite good guys. But you have to sort of do the favorite good guy, favorite bad guy as well, right? Because from the original trilogy, and this is not counting, of course, Lost Legends, because it's different for me there. But in the original trilogy, I think my favorite is Verminard. Just the idea of the Queen of Darkness coming back and corrupting the family lineage of the knight that had banished her in the Third Dragon War into her first true cleric is awesome. You can't beat that. So I Verminard in the original trilogy, I think is the best villain. Tanis in the original trilogy, I think is probably my favorite, with Sturm coming in close second. Let's see. Ooh, Raceland is a good choice, Skull Cowboy. Tanis for Chris is also a good one. Those are your 2 and 3 favorite. Your favorite is Sturm. Yeah, Sturm is great. I love Sturm. Sturm Stories, The Lost Chronicles is so much better explored than just the Chronicles. Yeah, and I really love The Lost Chronicles for contextualizing what's happening and the individual motivations until Dragons of the Hourglass Mage. That story, it had stuff in it that I just didn't think needed to be there at all. But what are you going to do? All right, so that is this review. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and making it a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. That's it for my review of Dragons of Time, edited by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. What did you think of the anthology? Do you want more Dragons anthologies without dragons in them? And finally, are these anthologies valuable to fans of the lore? Feel free to email me at info@dealsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to thank creator patron Aaron Hardy and developer patron Chris Androu. I would also like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you so very much in joining in that celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanjavar.